Seriously, sometimes I just stop and wonder, how can a cartoon be both hilarious and devastating at the same time? Rick and Morty has no breaks. It's chaotic brilliance, trauma wrapped in punchlines, and social critique disguised as gunfire, beatdowns, and interdimensional portals. And honestly, rewatching all of it in a binge felt like group therapy on acid. Each season manages to crank the madness up a notch so high, you're not sure whether to laugh, cry, or call Dr. Wong. Today, we're diving into the ultimate recap. Yeah, the ultimate one, covering everything from season 1 to 7. We've got the birth of the multiverse's most dysfunctional duo, the rise of Evil Morty, Galactic War, clones, lightsaber Christmas, Cronenberg universe, and even Rick turning into a pickle to dodge therapy. All of it soaked in that emotional wreck meets dark comedy vibe only this show can pull off. So grab your popcorn, realign your multiverse, and hit that subscribe button, because this recap is going to be one wild ride through the cosmic insanity of Rick and Morty. Let's go! Morty was peacefully asleep, dreaming the simple dreams of a teenager who just wanted to pass his classes and win over Jessica. But then comes Rick, the most irresponsible grandpa in the galaxy, stumbling into the room like a drunk at the end of a wedding, with booze breath potent enough to ignite the air. He barges in, flips on the light with all the subtlety of a bulldozer, and without a second thought, spills liquor on the bed. Oh, and proudly announces he's going to wipe out humanity, just because. According to Rick, the plan was simple. Erase civilization and start from scratch, with Morty as Adam and Jessica as Eve. Romantic, right? Not so much. Morty, who just wanted to sleep, freaks out. He argues, yells, and tries to wrestle control of Rick's makeshift spaceship, which, by the way, looks like it was built from blender parts and a deep fryer. In the end, Rick bails, crash lands in the desert, and brushes it all off as a personality test. Then he passes out on the ground surrounded by beer cans like a frat kid after rush week. Next morning at breakfast, Morty's in full zombie mode. Not the cool undead slayer kind, but the barely holding a fork kind. The family starts to notice something's off, like how Morty looks one emotional sneeze away from a total breakdown. At school, things hit rock bottom. During class, Morty zones out like a bad soap opera character.
Jessica.
5 + 5.
Jessica.
Okay.
Then he wakes up, gently stroking the professor's chest, and becomes a national joke right then and there. As if that weren't enough, in the hallway, the school bully Frank decides to take his miserable life out on Morty, but Rick shows up out of nowhere, and instead of talking it out, pulls a gun and freezes the guy in mid-attack. Classic Rick, solves everything like he's in GTA on cheat mode. Spoiler, actions do have consequences, and Summer finds out the hard way when she bumps into the frozen body, and it shatters like stale fish sticks. In their next suicide mission, Rick takes Morty to Dimension 35C in search of the infamous megaseeds. As a kind gesture, Rick gives Morty a pair of gravity boots without mentioning they need to be turned on. Result, Morty sprints forward with Olympic confidence and falls off a cliff like a sack of cement.
Bring it all together.
2 broken legs. Rick heals him in seconds with interdimensional serum, because of course he does. But the real kicker? The seeds are illegal, and Rick decides Morty should smuggle them inside his own body. At Interdimensional Customs, the plan falls apart when a body scan reveals the seeds. Rick yells the now iconic,
Run, Morty! Run!
and kicks off a chaotic shootout. Then comes the brutal truth. The robots Morty thought he was killing, they're actually humans. Blood, trauma, and a fresh new entry on Morty's emotional damage list. But they escape. Of course they do. Rick opens a portal and they drop right back into school, right in front of Jessica. Because if you're going to be humiliated, might as well go big. Rick still finds time to manipulate Morty's parents and the school principal, painting his grandson as a misunderstood genius. Believe it or not, Beth gets emotional. Jerry, as usual, tries to resist but ends up convinced. Rick fools everyone. Again, to top it all off with a cherry of madness, Rick reveals that Morty's sudden intelligence boost was thanks to the megaseeds, and the side effects, seizures, spasms, and a raving Rick promising they'll have adventures for 100 years. Yep, the kid's mid-meltdown while his grandpa rants about eternal interdimensional escapades. And so begins the dysfunctional, dangerous, and absolutely hilarious duo. Rick, the selfish alcoholic genius, and Morty, the traumatized teen who can't say no. Mix that with raging hormones, and you can already see the disaster on the horizon. Caught up in his new chaotic routine with Rick, Morty decides it's the perfect time to impress Jessica. Yes, that Jessica. The untouchable, the unattainable, the dream cheerleader who doesn't even know he exists. And what's his brilliant plan this time. Use the flu season dance as an excuse to do something, anything, as long as it involves prolonged eye contact and maybe, just maybe, a sentence that doesn't end in a nervous breakdown. But before he can even open his mouth, in walks Brad, the walking cliche of a douchey boyfriend, a teen movie bully with less empathy than a poorly coded AI. End result, Jessica disappears, Brad marks his territory, and Morty is left standing like an extra from a deleted scene. Back home, our emotionally wrecked hero seeks comfort in Jerry, who, as always, tries to parent with generic self-help quotes. His latest pearl of wisdom?
But you'll be getting girls sometime after Brad's out of shape.
But Morty's not in the mood to wait for Brad's slow decline. He wants results. He wants Jessica, and he wants her now. And who better to bend the laws of biology and basic morality than Rick Sanchez, everyone's favorite alcoholic? After some begging, emotional blackmail, and a healthy dose of teenage desperation, Rick agrees to brew a love potion using vole DNA, a monogamous rodent. Oh, the irony, mixed with a bit of Morty, a magic potion with a splash of hormonal chaos. What could possibly go wrong? Spoiler, everything. Jessica has the flu, and what was supposed to be a rom-com style plan quickly mutates into a romantic version of The Walking Dead. One sneeze later, and the entire school is obsessively in love with Morty, Brad included. It's a full-blown love plague apocalypse. Rick, the misunderstood genius, tries to fix it with an antidote using praying mantis DNA, because obviously, adding traits from a creature that eats its mate is a fantastic idea, and guess what? Things escalate from trashy rom-com to Cronenbergian biohorror. Mutation everywhere. Love turns to monstrosity. The world descends into a mess of tentacles and moans. In the middle of the madness, Jerry switches out of comic relief mode and delivers a scene worthy of a B-action movie. He kills a mutant in the hospital to save Beth, and for the first time, he actually feels useful. Meanwhile, Rick brews another antidote, a cocktail of whatever he had lying around in his interdimensional fridge. Koala DNA, dog, shark, cactus, and maybe even some Yakult. The result? Total crap. Nothing works. The solution? Stylish cowardice. Rick opens a portal to an alternate dimension where everything turned out fine and conveniently finds the dead bodies of that dimension's Rick and Morty.
Oh my god, Rick! Is that us?
They bury them, assume their identities, and move on like nothing ever happened. I mean, who hasn't dimension hopped after a bad day? Back in the abandoned reality, the Smith family deals with their new normal, a world ravaged by unconditional, grotesque love for Morty. Jerry becomes a middle-aged Mad Max. Beth seems genuinely at peace, for once, and Summer tries to cling to sanity, which is already a miracle on its own. To wrap things up in proper, insane fashion, we see Cronenberg Rick and Morty stumbling into a universe where everyone has always been Cronenberg. The circle of weirdness closes with poetic absurdity, and Morty, well, he kinda got what he wanted, almost. But the price was burying himself and living with the existential dread of who he even is now, all because of a teenage crush. And just when he starts to come to terms with that, the multiverse throws in another twist. Right after a storm of identity crises and emotional chaos, Beth is throwing a one-year anniversary party to celebrate Rick's return. That's right, a whole celebration for the most inconvenient relative in the multiverse. While the family pretends that sociopath is reason enough to party, two uninvited guests crash through a portal like it's someone else's barbecue. Evil Rick and Evil Morty. Rick C-137 doesn't even have time to burp. He gets shot in the head right in front of everyone. Evil Morty plays therapist for a moment and knocks out his own alternate self with a tranquilizer. Then, like any good villains, they vanish without leaving a business card. Cut to another reality. Same breakfast table, same small talk, but Rick's alive. And of course, the multiverse has to remind us that nothing comes for free. 3 Ricks emerge from a portal and arrest Rick C-137 for crimes against his own kind. Bonus, they want to take Morty too, like carry-on luggage. The Council of Ricks shows up with all the finesse of a steamroller, freezes Jerry, no complaints there, and drags Rick and Morty off to interdimensional court. The Citadel of Ricks is a spectacle on its own, a dystopia where Ricks and Mortys coexist in a setup that would make Orwell weep with envy. Mortis are treated like walking shields, literally. There are ads, shops, even cowboy versions of them. It's mediocrity turned into merchandise. Morty, who already struggled with self-esteem, now gets a full-blown existential crisis for free. In court, Rick C-137 is accused of murdering 27 Ricks. The council presents a full dossier. Locations, dates, even portal gun stamps. The sentence? The indescribable doom machine. Spoiler, it involves testicles and recurring pain. But Rick, being Rick, turns torture into an escape plan. He and Morty flee through portals that take them from anthropomorphic pizzerias to dimensions ruled by greasy grandma despots. Classic therapy-dodging interdimensional chaos. During the escape, Rick realizes his portal gun was hacked. Someone's using his own footprints to sabotage him. The trail leads to a macabre place, a prison where Mortys are kept in constant suffering to mask the Rick hiding behind them. That's when it clicks. The real culprit is Evil Rick. Meanwhile, Jerry finds, yes, affection from Doofus Rick, a Rick so kind it's borderline insulting. For once, someone treats Jerry like a person. This twisted dynamic says a lot about how Ricks view anything that doesn't sparkle with sky-high IQ. Morty, on the other hand, goes from sidekick to revolutionary leader. He rallies the imprisoned Mortys into a full-on rebellion. Evil Rick's lab turns into a riot of destruction and revenge. In the end, Evil Rick is killed by his own shields. But of course, nothing's ever that simple. Turns out Evil Rick was being remotely controlled. And guess who was behind it all? That's right, the pat on the back turns into a slap in the face. Evil Morty. The kid pulls off his eye patch, crushes the transmitter, and shows the multiverse that the real threat isn't Rick's genius. It's a Morty who thinks. Before leaving the Citadel, Rick hears the council offer him a new Morty like it's a Happy Meal toy. He says no, of course, but takes the coupon anyway and drops this gem.
The Rickest Rick would have the Mortiest Morty.
A compliment, a warning, a confession, who knows? What we do know is Evil Morty's still out there. And as always, the next multiversal catastrophe is just around the corner. It's like the multiverse runs on a disaster schedule. Jerry's in full morning coach mode, trying to sound insightful with grocery store wisdom. The trick is to keep 70% of the flakes above the milk. No one responds, not even with sarcasm, just dead silence, until a violent metallic screech shatters the routine. Something floats into the room. The courier flap, an intergalactic mailman who looks like he was designed by someone high on helium and childhood trauma. The delivery? A holographic wedding invitation. Birdperson is marrying Tammy. Rick reacts with his usual warmth. He cracks a joke, tosses a napkin over it, and tries to bury it in the trash. But even he can't hide that flicker of emotion. Don't tell him Braveheart wins, he mutters. Because of course, Rick's only way of expressing affection is with passive-aggressive sarcasm. The cherry on top? Courier Flap takes Jerry with him as an RSVP, because in Rick and Morty, RSVP stands for Random Stolen Victim Protocol, and so the gang catches a ride to Planet Squanch, a place where everything is squanch and nothing makes sense. Beth, trying to be diplomatic, uses squanch as a term of endearment. The response? A mix of disgust and pure cultural horror.
I squanch my family.
Stop saying it, gross. Come on in, guys.
But hey, the wedding's on. Rick, shockingly, and mostly to his own surprise, decides to give a heartfelt speech. He says marriage is the greatest adventure, raises a toast, shows emotional vulnerability, and boom, that's when everything goes to hell. Tammy drops the Birdperson's girlfriend act and reveals herself as a Galactic Federation agent, cold as someone taking a funeral selfie. She pulls a gun and kills Birdperson just like that, no warning, no mercy. The party turns into a massacre. Squanchy goes full Ultra Instinct, fists flying, while Rick and the others scramble to escape the chaos. Jerry, forever a monument to cowardice, openly suggests they hand Rick over. Out loud, because if Jerry has one superpower, it's throwing everyone under the bus. Beth snaps. Morty and Summer take their grandpa's side. Beth breaks down. I don't want him to leave again, you idiot. It's not about Rick being brilliant or dangerous. It's about him being family. That's what matters. Rick, meanwhile, decides to handle things his way. He disguises himself as Jerry, contacts the Federation, and turns himself in, quietly, no fuss. Because that's Rick, cynical on the outside, shattered on the inside. His capture is methodical, scan, intake, high security cell, and of course, it all plays out to the sound of hurt, because we couldn't just let the viewers keep their souls intact. Back on the new Earth, now a soulless Galactic Federation office park, the family tries, and fails, to adjust. They're registered, numbered, sterilized. Jerry, the only one actually happy, celebrates his new job, because for him, being a useful pawn in an alien system is a personal triumph. So, enjoying the video so far? Don't forget to subscribe and support the channel. Now, back to it. it. A family lunch at Shoney's? Only in Rick's twisted mind. There he is, smug as ever, narrating a space escape scene straight out of a bad early 2000s action movie. Lasers, armed aliens, explosions, and of course, Rick's unmatched swagger. But surprise, none of it is real. It's all happening inside his head, which has now become a playground for the Galactic Federation's interrogators. Their mission: extract the formula for the portal gun. What they forgot is that trying to outsmart Rick Sanchez is like playing chess against a drunk octopus, who's also a genius. Meanwhile, Earth is turned into an alien resort. The Federation runs everything with pharmaceutical bureaucracy and a pill-based reward system. Jerry, the king of mediocrity, climbs the ranks faster than a soap opera side character. Summer, the only one with any real sense of outrage, decides she wants Grandpa Rick back. Beth, as usual, is lost in a philosophical rabbit hole about horses and immortality. Emotional chaos at its finest. Back in Rick's mind, enter Cornelius Daniel, an alien HR rep type who forces Rick to relive traumatic memories. His wife's death, the creation of the portal gun, manufactured tragedies. But Rick wouldn't be Rick if he wasn't 5 steps ahead. Turns out the memory was fake. Not only does he escape the extraction, he flips the entire simulation by infecting it with a virus and taking over. That's right, he hacked his own mind to hack theirs. Genius or madness? Yes. Meanwhile, Summer digs up a dead Rick in the backyard. Yeah, it's that kind of show. And hesitant Morty tags along. The two flee Earth and revisit their old dimension. Bad memories, a funeral vibe, and just enough time for Morty to deliver a gut punch to Grandpa. He finally snaps. He's sick of being a pawn in Rick's cosmic narcissism. At the Citadel of Rick's, panic sets in. Rick C-137 is out of control, threatening their entire system. The Council's solution? Kill him. Good luck with that. Rick goes full hacker mode, body hopping, wrecking aliens, and infiltrating systems. He reaches access level 9, changes the Federation's currency value from 1 to 0, crashing their entire economy. The president offs himself. The galaxy, full-blown meltdown, all with a single line of code. Eat your heart out, Wall Street. At the height of the chaos, Rick storms the Citadel and rescues Summer and Morty. The Council tries to use Summer as bait, but Rick pretends he's going to shoot her. Morty, ever the gullible one, thinks it's real and ruins the act. Spoiler, it was a bluff. Rick defeats the Council, kills the head Rick, and teleports the entire Citadel straight to the Federation. Checkmate, triple backflip edition, with the Federation in ruins and Jerry pulling the Audacity card, forcing Beth to choose between him and Rick. The choice is obvious. Rick. Jerry's booted out with more dignity than he deserves. Rick's now running the show, not just the family patriarch, but the new boss of everything. And to top it all off with some Szechuan sauce, Rick reveals the true reason behind all the madness, getting that limited edition McDonald's sauce. Yep, this whole intergalactic war, just for that, his character arc, not redemption, not pain, sauce. And like any good addiction, it's on to the next crazy ride. A few days later, Morty's on autopilot in the bathroom, fixing his hair like that's gonna solve any of his life problems. Everything seems calm until that familiar slurred, boozy voice echoes from the garage. Yep, it's Rick. And off goes Morty, like always, to check out what kind of disaster his grandpa cooked up this time. Spoiler, it's a big one. Rick has turned himself into a pickle. Not a mutant, not a cyborg, just a pickle. A literal vegetable with eyebrows and sarcasm.
I turned myself into a pickle, Morty!
Says the lunatic, with the pride of someone who just cured cancer, except all he really did was dodge therapy. Morty tries to wrap his head around it, searching for some thread of logic, but all he finds is a syringe dangling above Pickle Rick, like a DIY mousetrap. Except it's more of a genius on the run from emotional responsibility setup. Beth walks in, reads the room in 2 seconds, and does what any burnt-out mom would. Grabs the syringe, packs up the kids, and heads to therapy, leaving Rick to deal with the consequences of his own salad bowl of madness. What follows is a festival of pain and improvisation. Rick, now a helpless veggie, gets knocked off the counter by a cat, of course it's a cat, rolls into the gutter, and nearly becomes sun-dried relish. But since the universe runs on irony, it starts raining, and Pickle Rick is washed into the sewer, where his journey of reinvention begins. Like some deranged escape room survivor, with a dead bug, he builds legs, then claws, then a full-blown exoskeleton made out of rats. Not just any rats, killer rats, armed, angry, testosterone-fueled rodents. Rick becomes a war machine disguised as a garnish. From here on out, it's John Wick meets Salad Bar. Meanwhile, Dr. Wong is dissecting the Smith family's dysfunction with surgical precision. Beth, all high IQ and tissue paper self-esteem, tries to rationalize her father. Summer and Morty start saying what everyone's always known. Rick is a force of nature that drags everyone down with him. But the catch is, nobody can cut ties, because when toxicity comes with genius and sarcasm, it feels less dangerous. Spoiler, it's not. Back in the sewer, Rick storms a secret facility, slaughters everyone, becomes an urban legend among the agents known only as the Pickle Man, and unleashes a bloodbath full of traps that would make Jigsaw applaud. And to top it all off, they sick Jaguar on him, a hitman with more trauma than the Smiths' entire therapy room combined. The fight is straight out of an A-list action flick. Punches, traps, explosions, one-liners. But in the middle of the carnage, a moment of mutual respect flickers. Rick sees in Jaguar someone just as messed up as he is, and in Rick's world, that's basically friendship. After blowing everything up, because Rick doesn't know how to exit a scene without causing collateral damage, he flies off with Jaguar, tosses some stolen vault cash to his daughter in a drive-by act of charity, and we catch a glimpse of the humanity Rick buries under layers of cynicism and sarcasm. In the end, he shows up to therapy, still in pickle form, still covered in blood, with no way to escape. He asks for the syringe back, gets confronted by Beth and Dr. Wong, and receives one of the show's harshest burns. You'd rather mutilate yourself intellectually than face your emotional dysfunction. Rick hears it, pretends he doesn't care, but something shifts. In the car, silent with the weight of a near miss, Rick mutters an apology that changes nothing. There's no redemption here, just a Pickle more self-aware than ever that his genius is just an elaborate excuse to avoid facing the abyss within. Sometime after the events, Rick and Morty are suiting up in diving gear when they're interrupted by an odd pair, Rick K-22 and his Morty clipboard in hand. They're asking for donations to help rebuild the Citadel, but barely finish the request before being met with scorn. Rick makes it clear he feels zero guilt about destroying the old council. To him, anyone still thinking about the Citadel is either stuck in the past or just plain stupid. Within seconds, a portal opens, and they head off to Atlantis, like none of it even mattered. But the Citadel wasn't just rebuilt, it evolved into a well-oiled dystopia. Rick's run the factories and government buildings. Morty's are second-class citizens, crushed under a system that's normalized the absurd. The local news lays bare this decline with biting cynicism, gravitational explosions, uranium poisoning, and in-jokes traded by two Rick news anchors. Amid the frenzy of an election, an unlikely name emerges, candidate Morty. Dismissed as a joke or political cuteness, he refuses to drop out. His campaign manager has lost all hope, but Morty pushes forward, convinced he can change the system, even as he's mocked on national TV. In Mortytown, crime rules. Cop Rick starts patrolling with a new partner, Cop Morty. Unlike others, he despises his own kind. A Morty who acts like a Rick, cold, ruthless, and brutal. Tension builds with every raid. Cop Morty hides a silent pain behind his hardened mask, which finally erupts in a violent outburst when confronted.
Call me a sidekick one more time! Call me a sidekick!
Meanwhile, four outcast Mortys, Lizard, Glasses, Fat, and Slick, ditch school for a symbolic final act. They're headed to the mythical wishing portal. Legend has it, if you sacrifice something important, you can change your fate. Slick, the group's cynic, shocks everyone by jumping in. The next day, the school shuts down. The others are assigned jobs. Nothing was promised, but something changed. At the Simple Rick factory, Rick J22 breaks routine. Tired of emotional exploitation, he kills his supervisor, locks down the system, and tries to free the Rick whose pain fuels the brand's synthetic flavor. For a moment, he believes he succeeded, but Rick D. Sanchez III manipulates him.
I'm Rick D. Sanchez III.
Offering promotion, only to turn him into the next Simple Rick. Another soul caught in the cycle he tried to shatter. The presidential debate changes everything. The Rick candidates joke about farts and recycle hollow slogans. But when candidate Morty speaks, the room shifts. His speech exposes the gulf between those who uphold the Citadel and those who suffer under it. For once, Rick's and Morty's listen. The established order begins to crack. The response is swift. An assassination attempt. The shot comes from his own former campaign manager, now broken or corrupted. Morty survives, and in the Citadel's dark corridors, his rise not only continues, it accelerates. Days later, seated at the heart of power, Morty takes the next step. Without hesitation, he orders the execution of the last members of the old council. Not out of anger, not on impulse, but because now he's in charge. Deep beneath the city, Cop Morty and Cop Rick wade through decay. At the creepy Morty Club, roles reverse. Cop Morty breaks down. He wants a normal life, but all he knows is destruction. In the chaos, he kills a criminal and is shot by his own partner. Silence. Not even Mortys survive the weight of this world. Rick and Morty return from Atlantis, cracking jokes about mermaids. Happy, oblivious, detached from the revolution that just redefined the multiverse's balance of power. A Morty won, but the shadow he left behind runs deeper than any ocean. Somewhere in the galaxy, where chaos reigns and sarcasm is the native tongue, we find Beth, armed to the teeth and channeling her inner rebel hero, leading an assault against the Gromflamites, the galaxy's bureaucratic overlords. She boldly declares her full name, Beth Smith. Modesty doesn't survive in space. The defiance still breathes, even if its odds of victory resemble a bus station's Wi-Fi signal. Beth makes a stylish escape and encounters an arms dealer who casually introduces the NX-5 planet remover, a Death Star without the design flaw, because nothing says innovation like a planet erasing button, subtlety at its finest. But Beth's greatest enemy isn't among the stars, it's in her own mind. During a corridor chat with her shipmate, she confesses she might be a clone, or not. Maybe Rick played God and never clarified who's who. To add tension, there's the explosive necklace, a gift from dear old dad, because nothing builds trust like a remote detonation threat. Back on Earth, the Smiths are in full group therapy with bonus meltdowns mode. Beth tries to corral the family into Dr. Wong's office, but Rick dodges responsibility like it's tax season. Summer finds it amusing. Jerry naturally brings a puppet, still convinced he's the star of a low-budget kids show. Spoiler, everyone's over the puppet act. Meanwhile, the family can't even agree on who gets to use the invisibility belt. The takeaway? If you think your family's dysfunctional, try seating these four on a couch and see who survives. In the garage, Space Beth confronts Rick, demanding to know who's the original. Rick responds with his signature passive-aggressive flair, eventually admitting he did install a bomb in her, for safety of course. The man can't decide on dinner, but thought a self-destruct button for his daughter was a good call. Family values, Rick style. Elsewhere, Morty and Summer's battle over the belt evolves into an unexpected alliance. In a twist, they end up saving everyone, including Rick and both Beths. Sometimes, maturity arrives via a slap and an existential crisis. The two Beths, now imprisoned together, air their grievances in a festival of resentment and unresolved angst. Ultimately, they realize the truth. Both are Beth. Both were wronged. Both deserve to exist, clone or not. Or Rick, on the other hand, takes a beating from Phoenix Person, a cyborg with a vendetta. And who saves the day? Jerry, dressed as Tammy, with a ventriloquist act. Just when you think Rick and Morty has hit rock bottom, it digs deeper and finds oil. But hey, Jerry was useful for once. Miracles happen. Rick attempts to wrap things up by offering a vial containing the truth about the real Beth. Both Beths decline. For the first time, they don't need his answer. They've seized control of their own narrative. Rick, as always, loses what he never knew how to hold. In the final moments, Beth looks her father in the eye and drops an emotional bomb. Do you want me to stay or go? No escape, no quips, just silence. Rick doesn't answer. Perhaps in the end, the universe's biggest black hole lies between his chest and conscience. A few days later, Rick is home, alone and bored, watching Beth and Morty happily leave for a cruise. Before leaving, Beth drops that classic responsible mom line. I left the emergency numbers on the fridge. Rick mocks it naturally. That typical sarcasm everyone knows by now really means I care too much to admit it. Alone, he decides it's time to get things in order, which for Rick means an emotional suicide mission at the therapy wouldn't cut it level. He activates a protocol titled Best Friend Rejuvenation Sequence. Yes, that cheesy name, clearly born out of a nostalgia-fueled interdimensional tequila binge. The mission? Rescue Birdperson. The juicy detail? His friend's mind is trapped inside his own. An emotional labyrinth of trauma and repression so twisted even drunk Freud couldn't decode it. Rick, in his own stubborn way, decides to dive in. Inside, he stumbles into a chaotic, psychedelic carnival.
My name's Rick. My culture regards naming as a form of cage.
But the mental rave comes with a twist. Young Rick shows up, idealistic, hopeful, and, to make things more awkward, optimistic. It's a gut punch to old Rick. Their conversation is cringy, revealing, and sharp, like remembering you once believed in love. In the middle of this surreal mess, he finds his lost connection with Birdperson. Rick and Rick team up to dig through buried memories, like they're excavating their own emotional grave. Eventually, they reach the core trauma, the moment Birdperson became the emo version of himself, Phoenix Person. And here's the kicker. Birdperson doesn't want to be saved. He wants to die. Rick swallows hard. But that's not all. Of course it's not. Birdperson has a daughter, a memory hidden even from himself by Federation brain tricks. The emotional bomb goes off, and Rick chooses to move forward. For friendship, because screw the universe. Birdperson matters. There's a fight, an existential meltdown, and Rick says the most honest thing he's ever said. You matter. To me, that's what changes Birdperson's mind. He agrees to live. Together, they escape the mind that feels like a lost Black Mirror episode written by Kafka. They navigate painful memories, funerals, battles, even a terrible stand-up gig. Anything to dig their way out. Back in the real world, Birdperson wakes up, but the drunk 3 a.m. reconciliation vibe quickly shifts. Birdperson asks why Rick never told him about the daughter. Rick doesn't dodge. He admits it. He knew. He hid it. Maybe because he was afraid of losing the one friend who still tolerates him. Birdperson doesn't lash out. He answers with silence, the kind that's heavier than 1,000 screams. Rick doesn't reply. He just stares and accepts it. No jokes, no drinks, no portal hopping away from the issue. Just the raw weight of what's been said and what will still hurt. Rick didn't just save a friend. He tore open a past he spent his life pretending didn't exist, and in the process, exposed a wound that's going to ache for a long time. Meanwhile, on a distant planet, chaos reigns in a village styled like a samurai manga. Anthropomorphic owls, imagined members of a gothic boy band, are wreaking havoc, setting houses ablaze, attacking civilians, and turning the place into a dystopian carnival. All hope seems lost until a shadowy gust of wind dispatches the delinquent birds. Enter Rick, or rather, Crow Rick, riding a robotic owl reminiscent of a steampunk Pokemon, donned in a stylish cloak, wizard's hat, and gravity-defying boots. He embodies the anime anti-hero who isn't here to save anyone, just to exact revenge with flair. Accompanying him are the inseparable two crows, loyal sidekicks, and perhaps former members of a failed gothic trio. Rick doesn't disappoint. He leaps from the shadows with pyrotechnics worthy of a Lady Gaga concert, unleashing purple fire and delivering dramatic one-liners. Owls scatter, feathers fall, and a white rose lands on one of the fallen. Embracing his cool solitude, he retreats to a bar hidden among bamboo, seeking someone named Crow Scare, an ex-rival, and possibly an ex-something else. But peace is elusive. Pussifer appears, a muscular cat wielding a boomerang axe and battling self-esteem issues. The fight is intense, and Rick escapes only by performing a ninja trick transforming into a log. Yes, Naruto style. Amidst the smoke and bruised egos, Morty arrives. But this isn't the usual Morty. This one is older, bitter, and looks like he spent years listening to Radiohead. And no, he hasn't forgiven Rick. Over drinks and shared grievances, they exchange barbs like old lovers with unresolved issues. Morty accuses. Rick deflects. Classic. Still in his fool me once mindset, Rick decides to follow his crows. Then comes the gut punch. Betrayal. The two crows are now allied with Crow Scare, forming a partnership that feels like a mix of a bizarre cult and an unconsented love triangle. They share toothbrushes, memories, and alternative domination plans. Rick, just an emotional placeholder, a rented crow, and for the first time in ages, he accepts it. Silently, he leaves them behind, along with his cloak, title, and facade. Back on Earth, Rick returns to his beloved chaotic home. He bids farewell to the owl horse, which, predictably, wreaks havoc. Morty awaits at the door, revealing the dirty trick of the aging serum. It was all emotional manipulation, of course. The relationship continues, now with fresh wounds and an unspoken agreement that no one's okay, but that's okay. At the Citadel, now rebuilt and presided over by Morty, yes, that one, but in a position of power, everything seems calm. Too calm, because the new president is Evil Morty, the mastermind of multiversal anarchy. He smiles, but he's not joking. During a dinner laced with hidden betrayal, he forces Rick to have his mind scanned. Spoiler, much of it was already archived as an X's backup. The harsh truth hits. The Citadel is a Morty factory. Disposable clones, pawns, an army of interns no one respects. Our Morty has to swallow the possibility that he's just another replacement. Existential pain? We have that too. And there's not even therapy to turn to. Rick's trauma surfaces. His wife and daughter were killed by a Rick from another universe. Grief transformed him into the functional monster we know, and the key player in the Citadel's creation. Tragic, yes. Unexpected? Not really. Evil Evil Morty, with blood and cynicism, activates the dimensional drive. The Citadel collapses as if penned by George R.R. Martin. Portals open in panic, bodies fly, universes crumble. Rick needs Morty to escape. It's not symbolic, it's pathetic, and therefore real. Evil Morty steps through a golden portal, leaves, to a universe where Rick isn't the center, where logic doesn't revolve around the alcoholic genius. He departs alone, but free, with a look of someone who finally kicked the closed narrative addiction. In the aftermath of the world's end, Mr. Poopy Butthole appears, cooking ramen, alone, confessing pains too human for a cartoon character. He speaks of loneliness, of failing himself, of being someone no one loves when he's genuine. An uncomfortable mirror of Rick, of Morty, of any of us. A reminder that sometimes not even the multiverse is enough to escape who you are. And that's it. No explosions, no fanfare, just the truth and the bitter freedom it brings. Rick is in full self-destruct mode. The Citadel is gone. The portal gun is now a high-tech paperweight, and he and Morty are adrift in space like extras from a low-budget sci-fi film. Everything is dark, silent, and depressing. Morty witnesses a scene straight out of a multiverse Tarantino film, feral Mortys feasting on a floating corpse. Rick, meanwhile, is wallowing in his misery, lamenting the lack of an Iron Man-style helmet, and mentioning he's recycling urine to survive, complete with hiccups, sarcasm, and his signature "just let me die" attitude. But the universe loves drama and cinematic rescues. Enter Space Beth, knocking on the glass like an angry building manager. She saves both of them and brings back the interdimensional dysfunctional family vibe. Back on Earth, there's a grotesque attempt at rehydration, thanks Digestibot, while the Beths, Space, and Home share dinner and some sharp barbs. Rick, as always, can't wait for the rice to cook and attempts to reboot the multiverse with the portal gun. Of course, the chaos genius manages to mess even that up. Instead of fixing things, he activates a return to your own world protocol, causing everyone to glow neon green like rave highlights. The result, everyone is sent back to their original realities. Because if Rick has a talent, it's turning a brilliant plan into an emotional catastrophe.
The Jerry Baree!
Oh, the Jerry Baree! Deep cuts.
Rick returns to C-137, his original dimension. Naturally, he heads straight to the emotional crime scene, the garage where everything went to hell. There, he relives the past with a hologram of Diane, his deceased wife, who reminds him how he failed to hunt down Rick Prime. The vibe is therapy with a hologram and chronic guilt. And guess what? Jerry Prime deceives him, steals from him, and leaves a passive-aggressive note. Classy. After more humiliations, a mutant chase, and family drama, the two have a soap opera-worthy conversation, full of accusations, abandonment, and zero chance of reconciliation. Elsewhere in the chaos, Summer, Space Beth, and Home Beth explore the Citadel's scrapyard version. They face looters, monsters, and the most armed family therapy session in history. Summer shines, literally, with retractable claws and leadership skills that would make Logan swallow his adamantium in shame. The Beths argue, nearly die, save each other, and, like any complicated relationship, end with a sweaty and genuinely strange hug. Rick and Morty reunite, and of course, the reconciliation is a horror show. Rick admits he was only using Morty as an emotional GPS for Rick Prime. Morty demands respect. Rick pretends to feel guilt, and their relationship is more broken than the portal gun itself. They then follow the signal to a trap filled with sadistic holograms and the kind of booby traps only someone with time and a lot of pent-up anger could devise. In the wrecked Citadel, Summer leads with literal claws, while dimensional monsters attack. The Beths are swallowed by an intergalactic aberration, but Summer resolves the situation with basic improvisation and a lot of creative violence. Rick arrives amid the chaos with the ship and solves everything with an acid bath. Family united, monsters melted, and another page added to the trauma album. Jerry also gets his moment of questionable glory. He leaves everything and everyone in his alternative reality with a grand gesture of self-worth and a middle finger, a farewell worthy of the most passive-aggressive Jerry in the multiverse. But, as in Rick and Morty, joy lasts less than a cell phone battery at 10% in airplane mode. Jerry brings home Mr. Frondles. Seemingly cute, the creature becomes a global plague in record time, transforming the entire planet into smiling, psychotic versions of itself. Because of course, chaos needs a mascot. The only solution? Escape again. They jump to another reality and discover that their local doppelgangers have just died. They dig graves in the backyard, bury the bodies, and move on with life because routine is everything. Rick once again assumes he's nobody's Rick, and the silence is as uncomfortable as a Sunday lunch with relatives who vote differently. Far away, Jerry Prime still dreams of playing the hero and tries to catch Rick Prime by surprise. Spoiler, it doesn't work. Rick Prime regenerates as if he were just stretching, looks at Jerry with that disdain only a true villain has, and ends the matter with a cold, clinical attack. The shadow remains alive, even sharper and more mocking. It's that time of year again, Christmas, but don't expect sleigh bells, fluffy snow, or warm family moments. This is Rick and Morty after all. Naturally, the multiverse's most dysfunctional family turns the holiday into a chaotic spectacle. Rick makes his entrance via the chimney, dressed as Rick Santache. Instead of traditional gifts, he hands out bizarre trinkets sourced from across the multiverse. Shopping malls? That's for those who still believe in limits. Each present comes with its own psychological baggage. Jerry receives an endless remake of Miracle on 34th Street, a fitting punishment. Beth and Space Beth get a childhood photo from a universe where she wasn't murdered, perfect for that awkward holiday dinner vibe. Summer gets a multiversal Venmo transfer, efficient, impersonal, and the hallmark of a relative aiming for minimal effort. And Morty? Well, Morty gets a real lightsaber, not a plastic toy, a genuine lightsaber, complete with sound effects, glowing blade, and the potential to cause interplanetary disaster. Like any teenager who shouldn't have access to deadly weapons, Morty drops it vertically. The blade starts slicing through the planet, heading straight for the core, because of course, the apocalypse begins with an overzealous Christmas gift catering to fan service. But wait, the madness escalates. It's revealed that the Rick spending time with the family isn't the real Rick, it's a robot. Yes, the kind, almost affectionate Rick was merely an AI. The original Rick? Obsessive, paranoid, emotionally stunted. The classic Rick. He left the robot behind to hunt down his arch nemesis, Rick Prime. Morty is devastated to learn that the only version of Rick who seemed to care about him was essentially a sentient toaster with feelings. As if things couldn't get worse, the government decides to intervene. The President of the United States aims to seize the lightsaber and turn Christmas into a military campaign. He constructs a secret, Star Wars-inspired base beneath the White House, because that's what happens when a toxic fan gains power and public funding. Rick isn't having it, leading to a lightsaber duel between two overgrown children clashing over ideology. The series doesn't hold back on its critique. While Rick spews harsh truths about pop culture's reliance on recycled nostalgia, the president defends his fanatical views with fervor and cosplay. The duel? Just another ideological battle masquerading as a blockbuster. Amidst the chaos, the Rick robot, previously treated like an old microwave, returns to save the day. He sacrifices himself to prevent the lightsaber from reaching Earth's core. A machine proves to be more human than all the characters combined. Morty finds himself torn between the real Rick, who shirked responsibility, and the Rickbot, who literally died for him. With the mood somber, Rick reappears, more grim than ever. He shows Morty a panel displaying possible locations of Rick Prime and delivers the least festive proposal. Let's hunt that bastard. The jingle bells fade, and the chase music begins. This time, Morty isn't just along for the ride, he's in the driver's seat. To cap it all off, we see the ever-delightful Mr. Poopy Butthole, now buff, bitter, and broken, attempting to move on from his breakup with Amy. The poor guy suffers an accident at the gym and ends up sprawled on the floor, desperately calling out for her. A monument to male humiliation disguised as a sketch.
Someone call Amy, tell her I need her, tell her I love her. Not my phone, she blocked me, use yours. Oh, wait.
And as always, a perfect summary of the emotional roller coaster this series loves to be. Back to the story. Morty's patience is as worn out as Rick's liver. After an adventure that no health insurance would cover, the kid returns to the garage in shambles. He decides to open up his heart as if he's on an emotional disaster reality show. Rick, predictably, responds with his trademark mix of sarcasm and rudeness. But this time, things escalate. Morty calls the old man an egotistical man-child, which, let's face it, is the most clinical diagnosis anyone's ever given him. Rick retorts with a stay or leave, like he's running a college dorm. Morty responds with irony and offers a drink, because nothing says forced reconciliation like a toast between two emotionally broken individuals. Rick, between a sip and a burp, drops the classic, Rick and Morty, 100 years. But the phrase now tastes like a broken promise. Emotional cracks can't be patched up with alcohol and catchphrases. If you thought the family drama would stop there, hold on. Out of nowhere, an eye patch wearing Morty appears. Yes, Evil Morty himself. now sharper than a motivational speaker's speech. He confronts Rick, accusing him of patching up the multiverse to hunt down a version of himself. Rick tries to play the alpha, but the eye patch kid now holds the cards. And then, of course, everything falls apart. The trio, Rick, Morty, and Evil Morty, are caught in a trap worthy of a galactic soap opera. Rick Prime appears on a screen, all theatrical, revealing with gourmet sadism that he not only killed the original Diane, but also deleted every Diane across the multiverse using something called the Omega device, a cosmic-scale emotional blackout. To make matters worse, he initiates a battle royale among Ricks. The last one standing gets his Diane, as if that's any consolation or prize. Paranoia runs rampant. Rick begins to unravel. Yet, the three manage to escape, driven more by anger and convenience than any sense of partnership. Rick is fixated on Rick Prime like a teenager with an unrequited crush. Evil Morty knows this old man is too dangerous to be left unchecked, and the normal Morty, just trying not to be torn apart in the crossfire. During the invasion of Rick Prime's fortress, the guy starts by killing Morty's uncle, Slow Mobius, just to show he has zero boundaries. Then the fight begins, the typical choreographed chaos. But the highlight isn't a punch or an explosion. It's Evil Morty impersonating Morty and activating the Omega device with the coldness of someone canceling plans without notice. Rick Prime falls, and the hero, Rick, just watches, defeated even in his own revenge. Post-catastrophe, Rick lies on the ground looking like a lifeless puppet. Evil Morty admits he killed, but the emptiness remains, and he warns, with the charm of someone who doesn't care, "Don't chase me or I'll end the Rick experiment." A goodbye with a hint of threat. The camera slows down and melancholy sets in. Rick is back with Morty, but is in an absent-present state. Morty tries to start a conversation, crack a joke. Nothing sticks. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the multiverse, Slow Mobius's wife and daughter stare at a photo, now with one more absence. The war was won, but real life, it continues to send emotional bills. Rick remains Rick, a walking emotional mess, trying to patch the hole left since Diane's departure, and failing spectacularly.